we continue with Vashista, and we talked about the higher mind and the lower mind. Higher mind is, in the scriptures they say buddhi. You don't look for an entity, because the higher mind discriminates, concentrates, and inquire into one's true nature. The nature of the higher mind, and here in Vashista he says, it's the higher mind seeks the self only in order to dissolve itself in the self. This is indeed in the very nature of the higher mind. Okay? The lower mind is the personality, means the sense of separation of being a person. It's what is known, and people call it with different names, egoic mind. It can be individual mind, individuality, yes. This egoic mind is always outward bent, taking itself to be the doer and experiencer of pleasure and pain, and it takes the world to be real. Yes? This outward bent personality, it never discriminates itself. It cannot discriminate itself. It discriminates other objects because it believes that it is the first object, the physical body. So through the sense perception, through a physical body, it perceives other objects, so now it can discriminate other objects. The higher mind can discriminate the lower mind, the ego itself. Yeah? Because it's more subtle, it's prior to the ego, and its nature, because it's still in forgetfulness, it is seeking now the self in order to dissolve itself into the self, because that's the strongest yearning. That's its yearning. It's like when a child loses its mother. Let's say he's walking in a canyon, in a shopping mall, and he is a 3-year-old or 5-year-old child, and suddenly the mother disappeared. All his focus is to look for the mother. He's crying, all he cares is to find the mother. The higher mind, all it cares is to seek the self in order to dissolve itself into the self. Because it's the first one who came out from the self and forgot the face looking in of Maya. Yes? So it's in our nature to seek the self in order to dissolve into the self. When the egoic pattern tendency gets weaker, that's what's active internally. And that's where the mind is undoing itself happily. There is no more, oh, I'm going to lose something, oh, I'm going to this, oh. All the investment in the pain, which what drives the egoic, the personality, is pain-ridden. It rides on pain, because it's fuel is I want and I don't want. Yeah? I want pleasure, I don't want pain. That's the fuel, because it is seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. Because pleasure for the ego is happiness, and pain is sorrow. So what happens, the ego, because it's so far out, identifies an object. It doesn't know anymore what is real happiness, absolute happiness. It's always alternating between the two, because the body has pleasure and pain.
So the ego is actually is seeking death.
The ego is basically
where the lower mind, where the higher mind is seeking eternity.
Yeah. The ego is actually just confused, moving from one to the other.
In its confusion, it's going towards death.
the ego itself doesn't die. Because it identifies with the body, it imagines that it's going to death. There is no death for the ego because the ego doesn't really exist. You cannot kill something that in the first place is non-existent. Right? Because there is already an appearance of a physical body, we can see a body is born and body dies. That's obvious.
But if it seeks death itself, it frees itself up.
The thing is that there is no death for the ego because it doesn't exist. I'll repeat it again. The body doesn't really care because it is insentient. It is not a conscious entity. Means it has no desire. It just a reactivity. It's an organism that if you take the mind away that identifies with this organism, whether you throw this object from the window, from 30th floor, or you let it be as it is, it doesn't really care. It has no preference. It's like I say, if you take the mind that identifies with the body and you put it in boiling soup, boiling water, and turn it into soup, it doesn't really care. This is what happens with animals. We kill the animal. That means the identity of the animal as an animal and the life force is gone. It is just an object. It doesn't really care. Bake it, fry it, barbecue it, boil it. The physical body is the same for a human. It just because there is an identity that believes itself to be a physical body, that it has death is pain, life is pleasure. When actually, when there is absence of identity, that's where real joy and unalloyed peace and happiness can reveal. Yeah? So the body we can see based on our sense perception and our intelligence is that from the moment it is born, it can only die. So if we stay identified as a body, then it appears we're going towards death.
Yes.
Okay? Yet even the one who believes that is going towards death never really die, because it is a conceptual image, a mirage that doesn't really exist. A mirage means there's an appearance of water. Nobody can drink water from an appearance because there's no real water there. An ego is not a bad thing. It just doesn't really exist. It's a mirage. So it might continue to appear as an appearance when there is no identification with that. So there's no problem with the appearance. When there is identification with the appearance as being something real, problems begin. And one thing one has to realize, the power of illusion, that although it's not real, it makes the experience appear totally real. So although it's non-existent, knowing this just intellectually and not experientially, what happens, the ego, although it doesn't exist, can cause real suffering. This is the power of Maya. Although she doesn't exist, she causes real suffering because she derived the reality from who you truly are. Okay? She derived it because the reality is within Maya and Maya is within it. So although she is unreal, she can create real pain, real suffering, real emotion, real experience. So just intellectually is to start to realize, and then discrimination and inquiry and concentration, inquiry into the self has to be active, awake. Because if one would just speak the words, without the experience, it would remain on the mental level. The mental level is the mirage, the experience of being aware is yourself. So that's why innermost direct experience is always the ultimate. Yes?